So, that big day is here. Your SAT score finally came out. And after praying for a good score for about 15 minutes, you decided, what's the worst that can happen? Then you check your score and you quickly realize that you were screwed. You have done all this grinding just to increase your score, but you underperformed again. Luckily, you don't need to look any further because in this video, I'll show you exactly how you can easily improve your SAT score. So sit back, relax, and soak up the information. You don't want to miss it. What's up guys, David here, and today I'm going to talk about how you can improve your SAT score. In this video, I'll talk a little bit about the math and verbal section. But before I do that, I would like to kindly ask everyone who finds this video valuable to go and leave a like, as it helps me defeat the evil YouTube algorithm, which means more people will get to see this video and get value from this video, as well as subscribing to this channel, as I will be making videos like this every single week. And if you're a college student like me, you're definitely be benefiting from these videos. So I took the SAT 2 times and my highest score was a 1450. On that test, I got a 750 on math and a 700 on verbal. So if you're someone who's trying to get like a 1500, I don't know how much my information can actually help you, but still stay because it will make me happy. Alright, in all seriousness though, I feel like regardless of where your score is currently at, you can still benefit from this video, because I honestly feel like someone who can consistently get like a 1400 on practice tests could potentially get a 1500 on the actual test with some luck. And I feel like if I had taken it 2 more times, I probably would have as well. Unfortunately, at the time, I suffered a very contagious disease that I sadly contracted at the end of my junior year, known as the senioritis, that I still have not fully recovered from. And that, plus the fact that I am a disappointment, I decided to take the score and dip. Anyways, I have waffled a lot already, so here's some of my tips for the first section, which is the reading section. I feel like we can most agree that the reading section is by far the most painful section out of the 4, because the passages are usually just so boring that you lose focus after reading a paragraph. So if there's one tip I can give you right now, it is to not overexhaust your brain during this section. Now, when answering questions, I know a lot of SAT teachers like to tell you to quickly read the passage and then go straight to the question and do as many as you can. But I honestly hate that method. That method takes way too much time, and if you don't remember what you have read, which is very likely considering how boring the passage really is, you pretty much just wasted a couple minutes. What you should do instead is to map out your questions. Basically, before you even look at the passage, go ahead and look at the questions first. When you look at the questions, go ahead and find the ones that will direct you somewhere in the passage. Some of these questions are going to be context clues, and some of them will direct you to like a specific line and ask you what it means or something like that. A couple examples of these kind of questions will be shown on the screen right now. Now, what I would do is I'll basically go ahead and sort of mark where those questions are directing in the passage, and then write the question number right next to it so you'll know which question it's asking. Once you do that, go ahead and read the sentences surrounding that and try to answer the question. Do the same for all of the other line directing questions. Even if you can't find the answer right away, it is okay, because by doing that, you have pretty much accidentally read the entire passage. This strategy works very well for double passages because there is no way you're going to have time to read 2 passages word for word. This is obviously a very general overview of this strategy, so if you want me to make a detailed video specifically focusing on this particular strategy, go ahead and let me know in the comments below, and maybe I'll make one. Something else that I feel like no one ever talks about is vocabulary. Yes, I know, College Board got rid of the vocabulary section in 2015, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it at all. I mean, I would not recommend you check out a whole book and memorize every single vocab in that book, but if you're someone who is constantly running into unfamiliar words in a passage, maybe it's time for you to improve your vocabulary. Because on the SAT reading section, there will be several instances where you'll be indirectly asked what a vocab word means. An example of that would be like a context clue question about a word in a line. But if you don't know what that word means, or if you don't know what one of the answer choices mean, you could probably get that question wrong. There are obviously a lot of ways you can improve your vocabulary. You could obviously buy something on Amazon, buy some flashcards, buy a book, but my personal favorite is to go on Quizlet and to search up some SAT vocab. My last advice for the reading section is to just sort of get comfortable with all of the reading genres. The SAT will have 4 passages and 1 double passage, and I can almost guarantee you that in every test you take, there will be a science passage, a literature passage, a history passage, a persuasive passage, and a really old passage. I personally really hate the literature and the really old passages. The literature passage is like a story. These passages are incredibly difficult for me because 1, the stories are usually not interesting, 2, because the plotting strategy I talked about earlier does not really work with these passages. However, genuinely, the questions in these passages are usually a lot easier compared to the questions from other passages because the answer of the questions are probably going to be found somewhere in that passage since it is a story after all. Therefore, if you can understand the story, you should be fine. If you're someone who struggles with these types of passages, my best advice is to go ahead and read some of the classic novels and get comfortable with them. The really old passages are difficult because they're written in a different time period. I mean, think about it. We obviously don't speak English the same way as someone 500 years ago would, and because of that, if we are reading something 500 years ago, it probably won't make much sense. Unfortunately, to this day, I still struggle with this passage, but what I can say is that the more you practice, the better you will be at them. Also, try to map your questions out because that strategy works very well for these passages, and there will often be dead giveaways hidden inside of these passages. As for the science, history, and persuasive passages, you really just need to know what the author is trying to tell you. If you're someone who struggles with these, all I can really tell you is to go ahead and find articles from the internet and try to understand those. Next up, we have the writing section. This section is mostly about revising passages to where it is both grammatically correct and logical. Unfortunately, there isn't really a strategy that can really help besides understanding all grammar rules. Now, I obviously don't want this to be a 30-minute video, so I am not going to be going over them, as most students don't really have a problem with this section. But if you do want me to make a video where I go over every grammar rule that you would need to know for the SAT, let me know in the comments below. Just know that most people, including myself, make grammar mistakes all the time. In fact, you probably have already picked out like 5 or 10 grammar mistakes that I have made in this video just talking to you. So please make sure you don't just simply revise it to where it makes sense to you. Make sure you dive deep into every grammar rule when you approach these questions. Next up, we have the math no calculator section. This section is pretty self-explanatory. It is basically a math section where you can't use a calculator. The thing about this section is that it starts off really easy, but it progressively gets more difficult as you go on. The problems on the SAT covers concepts from Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and a little bit of pre-cal. So if you were to go back and take the Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 final exam and get an A on all of them, with some practice, you should be able to get a 700 on the math section. So I think that tells you what you could be working on to improve your math score. There are technically some categories of concepts on the math section that you could probably find on the College Board website. But again, I don't want this video to be like a 30-minute long video, so I am not going to cover them all. But if you do want me to cover it, let me know in the comments below. Just keep in mind that my highest SAT score for math is a 750, which is pretty average in the Asian community. In fact, there's probably already a couple people who are bullying me in the comments. Just be aware that I may not be able to give you the most accurate explanations, but I will obviously try my best. Something else I hear that's been thrown around a lot is how you can eliminate careless mistakes by reading the questions carefully. However, I've never had that problem. But if you're someone who makes a lot of careless mistakes, I guess reading the questions twice or 3 times could help. Again, time is not really that big of an issue when it comes to the math section. So if you're someone who makes a lot of careless mistakes, that could be what saves you. So the last section is the math section with the calculator. This section is rather similar to the no calculator section, except you can use a calculator. Just like the previous section, the questions start off really easy, but progressively gets harder as you go. I think a good way to practice is to try not to use a calculator at all. After all, this has been confirmed by College Board that all problems on the calculator section could be solved without a calculator. Some of them will take a while and can be a pain in the butt to solve. Another thing I want to point out is that for most of the problems, there are actually multiple ways you can actually solve it. So what you can do is find all of the possible ways you can solve that specific problem. Again, the more familiar you are with the test, the better you'll be. Anyways, those are my strategies for all 4 of the SAT sections. My question to you is, what strategies will you implement on the SAT test? Feel free to share your strategies in the description below, and I'll see you guys next time.